Hi, everyone. My name is Felipe, and I'm here with the Charter for Compassion for our global read of the month of September, our webinar series that happens once a month. We bring authors with incredible books and incredible ideas so that we can talk to them and ask questions. The book that we are going to be talking about on this global read is Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life by Dacher Keltner. Thank you so much for being here. Our host is our friend Gard Jameson, and he will be introducing Dacher, and I will leave that to you both. And please, everyone, you're welcome to type questions. We'll try to review them. The conversation is going to be rich. We're happy that you're here. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Felipe. Well, Dacher, welcome, and really so excited. Really been anticipating this for a long time. I've only read your book 3 times now. I do believe it's a landmark book, and more importantly, I'm just so grateful. Dacher is the founder and director of the Greater Good Science Center, which is an amazing sort of institution which really plumbs the depths of the basic human emotions. The first one I tapped into was gratitude and the work you were doing with elementary school kids and gratitude journals, and just opened my eyes. And all of the work you do there is really transformational and pointing toward a better future, which I think all of our listening audience and all of the planet is hoping for. So I want to welcome you here, and I want to ask you just the basic question. I know throughout the book you talk about your dear brother who has passed, but the inspiration for this book, tell us how that emerged, and what was the experience like?
Yeah, thank you, Gard. And I'm such a I've been a fan of the Charter of Compassion for a long time, so it's an honor to be here. And I really appreciate all the work you do in promoting compassion, one of my favorite emotions. Yeah, the inspiration for writing this book was a couplefold, and you learn about this as you write. One was my childhood and my upbringing, and it just has to be said that I lived a childhood of awe, and all of its flavors. I was raised by a visual artist, and my mom taught poetry and literature and feminism. I grew up in the late 60s in Laurel Canyon, California, and there was, lots of awe everywhere. And so I had this remarkable childhood that really oriented me not only to art and beauty and wonder and revolution and the like, but then I was a kind of a scientifically oriented kid. And so I was really meant personally to study awe. And then the moment that I had to write the book, frankly, as you anticipated, Gard, was the passing of my younger brother, Rolf. He and I grew up in this childhood. We shared every moment of awe in my life, from hiking in the Sierras to being fathers of daughters to, just the crazy childhood we had and reflecting upon it. And when the night that he passed away of colon cancer, I was sitting next to him and holding his shoulder, and I had a spiritual awe experience that I could not make sense of as a scientist. I felt him, I sensed his soul. I felt him being pulled into dimensions of life that I didn't understand. And then after, I fell into a state of really hard grief, just missing my brother. And I went in search of awe. I just had to, knowing a lot about it as a scientist in the abstract, now I had to go find it personally. And that led me to this book.
Beautiful. And you mentioned the grief. Oftentimes people think of awe as an experience of standing on the top of mountains and having this blissful experience. There are many dimensions to awe, and you could share with us the sort of the multitude of ways in which awe is to be understood.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we do Science Guard is, it in some sense it can challenge our intuitions and assumptions and stereotypes. And when you ask people to, hey, tell me what you think awe is, a lot of people will say, oh, it's standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, or it's, being out in space, and like these really rare, extraordinary events. And in point of fact, our research now in about 30 countries finds a couple of things that are really important for this conversation. One is awe has many sources. It not only is nature, spirituality, music, art, but it's also the moral beauty of other people, like my brother, collective movement, big ideas, life and death, the life cycle, which was really reassuring to me. So it comes from what I call these 8 wonders of life that are all around us. We can listen to music for awe any moment of the day almost. We can contemplate an idea that matters to us. We can reflect on our mind and find wonder. So that was the first thing that really struck me as scientifically is, wow, awe, the everyday kindness of people you guys promote brings people to tears routinely. Awe, right? And then the second thing is awe is much more common than we assume. Around the world, 2 to 3 times a week, people are stopping with their mouths agape, saying, "That was awesome. It was an awesome sunset. It's awesome to see children learn language. It's awesome to think about an idea we've thought about, like compassion, for a long time." So, what that told me and what it told our lab, and I think it's central to the book, is like life's about awe, and we can find it pretty easily. So let's move away from stereotypes and feel it.
Yeah, and Rudolf Otto spoke often about
Yeah,
this, and I
yeah,
sort of equate the two. And
yeah,
he said it's also those nightmares that are repeating in the night.
yeah,
Awe in that, and there's awe
yeah,
in the loss of a loved one. And
yeah.
so, can you speak about that a little bit?
Mm. And so wonderful to cite, Rudolf Otto, the numinous, this space of experience that's not reducible to easy language and concepts, which is awe, right? Or transcendent emotions. You might throw bliss in there and some kind of love, etc. Yeah, one of the striking things, again, countering, especially I think Western European views of awe, right, is awe, very often awe comes out of hardship, nightmares, like you say, Guard, complicated views, thinking about climate destruction. For me, watching my brother die, was a horrific, colon cancer is horrific. And I was right there for, chemotherapy and surgeries and everything. It's pure horror. I spent a lot of time with prisoners who face the horrors of being incarcerated. And out of this struggle, what I find miraculous almost is that the human mind wonders about it.
Mm.
We're like, like when I watch my brother die, I'm like, why do people we love die? Too young, unfairly perhaps. What is death? The prisoners that I worked with for many years, they're like, why does the criminal justice system punish people of color like this? Why? And then the mind kicks into gear. It finds that awe you're talking about. Like, wow, this is really some vast thing that I can be part of, that I can change. And we grow. And, what a remarkable notion, what a remarkable property of our minds, that when we encounter those nightmares you talk about, we gain new insights about existence.
Yeah, yeah, and it translates into really amazing practical action and
Yeah.
policy. And
Yep.
maybe for a moment, just share the experience at San Quentin, because I believe you were involved in looking at solitary confinement,
Yep.
and you were scratching your head and you were
Yeah.
wondering, and it led to a bill in the California legislature that said, this is cruel and unusual punishment. This
Yeah.
this is not fit in a prison.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the interesting things about awe for our listeners is, when you feel awe and you get the tears and the goosebumps and you're just shaking, you're just shaken in your belief systems, it kind of tells you what you really care about in life, be it a spiritual practice or a place in nature or certain forms of moral beauty in other people. and for me, and it turns out both my parents were involved in the criminal justice system in terms of, teaching in it, extending compassion to prisoners with letter writing and the like. Um, I read this essay in the New Yorker by Atul Gawande on the horror of solitary confinement. And I read it 15 years ago, and it just, like you said, Gard, I was horrified. Solitary confinement, 40% of people have really almost psychotic symptoms. I was awestruck in some sense that our society would do this to people. And I just started teaching it and talking about it. Now at UC Berkeley, there's a whole student movement against solitary confinement, other versions of it. And then, because of that awe and horror and trying to understand this, the Center for Constitutional Rights reached out to me, and they had heard me talk about it. And they said, you should be part of this. You should write an amicus brief on the inhumane emotional treatment of people in solitary. You're put into solitary confinement for 20 years, like they had been at Pelican Brief, at Pelican, up at this maximum security prison. They don't get to see their family. They barely get to hug them. And so I got to write about the science of deprivations of love and compassion and what it does to the human mind. And, it led to this bill to outlaw solitary confinement. But even more remarkable is I studied what happened, how I was part of this. I was part of that legal movement because of prisoners who got together and somehow managed to have the largest hunger strike of 30,000 prisoners in US history. They organized it through these remarkable ways, protested, and then awakened all of us outside of the prison and said, this is inhumane. We can't have this as part of our world. So I was awestruck by that. And then in my other work in San Quentin prison, I got to meet a prisoner who had been involved in that movement, and we just looked at each other, and felt like, well, even in these horrifying conditions, there's change, and it requires awe and human connectivity and compassion.
Yeah, yeah. I've spent a little time at Spirit Rock meditating, and the two big words that emerge right from the tradition is compassion and wisdom.
Yeah.
And compassion. And it seems like they're allied. And
Yeah.
it feels like with that fellow and with all of the
Yeah.
things going on, there was a quality of wisdom that emerged from the awe that led
Yeah.
to really practical social change. So this is not a solitary individualistic thing, this word awe. This is about the collective as much as it is about the individual. Yes.
Oh, and it's so funny. Cultures develop ideas about moral emotions like compassion. Immanuel Kant, the great philosopher, said it's always blind and weak. He was totally wrong about that. Probably a kind of a sexist set of assumptions there. The same with awe, right? Like if you ask people, and imagine when I go out and I'm a Berkeley guy with long hair talking about awe, they're like, oh, this is about hot tubs and psychedelics and, banging on drums. But it's just the opposite. Awe reveals to you the systems that you're part of, right? And it says you're part of an ecosystem or a social system or a belief system or a musical tradition. And here, how can you contribute? And it just shines a light on that very fact. Like, oh, this is what I got to do, right? I have this set of skills and I can do that. And what an important change, sort of revision of our thinking about this important emotion, that it's actually our pathway to our best actions in the world. And I teach young people, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, they are grappling with what is purpose, what is my eudaimonic contribution to the world, and awe shines a light on it. It's so incredible. It's so contextual, right? Oh, I'm a social scientist. They want me to write about solitary confinement and touch. That's what I do, right? And it says this is where your best work is to pursue.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I teach Asian philosophy at the University of Nevada, and
Nice.
tell my students it's really a game show. You can you can digress to the reptilian brainstem with fear, anger, and anxiety, or you
Yeah.
can advance to something more amazing, which is a quality of joy and a quality of peace and a quality of unconditional love.
Mm,
Tell them, here's your first examination, which door are you going to pick?
yeah.
And if you want the fear and anger and anxiety, don't raise your hand, but come see me after class.
Yeah.
So, so I have a question for you. You've done a lot of work on gratitude.
Yeah.
How do gratitude and awe come together, or do they?
Yeah. I, and I spent a big part of my career studying compassion and still do from time to time, looking at the vagus nerve and the neuroscience of compassion and so forth. Um, I really, I align with a certain group of social thinkers from, Rachel Carson to David Hume to Charles Darwin to Karen Armstrong, and the Charter of Compassion of, we have evolved these deep moral emotions that provide wisdom to our social lives. And I think a few that are kind of most prominent figures are compassion, um, gratitude, and awe.
Mm.
And awe is your feeling of a feeling that arises when you encounter vast mysteries that you don't understand. Why is my brother dying? Why is there dark matter in every form in the universe? Why does this ecosystem, why do plants seem so alive, and how do they communicate? Mysteries. Gratitude is the feeling of reverence we have for things that are given to you. So gratitude is in some sense more earthly and worldly for the most part. It's like, oh, I have my health. I have this chance for education. I have my parents. I get to do this work in the world. And it's a little bit more concrete and not quite so vast as awe.
Mhm.
And the minute you push that vastness dimension, like, whoa, I'm grateful to be a living form or part of this universe, it starts to blend into awe. But there's intersections between the two,
Yeah,
but we can separate them.
yeah, that's fantastic. And Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, he said,
Yeah,
without awe, there will be disaster.
yeah.
But what I try to do is flip that and say, with awe, what will there be? So give us a sense of what your hopefulness is and what you see that if we cultivate a culture of awe, what do you see out in front of us?
It's been extraordinary being part of this, releasing this book, and then I'm in conversations with national parks and veterans and, Carnegie Hall and education and environmentalist groups. And, it is I think, I do believe, given what we've learned about awe, that cultivating it, like you've cultivated compassion, can really change a lot of our systems. So what's in front of us, um, first is just changing how we approach physical health. In the United States, life expectancy dropped for a couple of years. I mean, that's an exceptional finding, that here we are, and our life expectancy is going in a different direction than it should be. And I think part of the reason is that we don't have enough awe and wonder, that we need to bring it into our lives, right? In walking and in gardening and in contemplative practice and in being with people and dance and song and the like. And we know, from the science of awe, it helps with your heart, helps with your inflammation. It's very good news. And so I see awe arriving, and it's going to, in healthcare.
Mm.
Um, prescribing walks outdoors, prescribing listening to music. Um, for our next generation that has been so self-focused, taking selfies and thinking about the self and TikTok and Instagram, awe opens our minds to how we're part of larger things. And just fundamentally in our identity, we're part of ecosystems, we're part of communities. And so I see it, we're hosting a class on awe for educators at the Greater Good Science Center. So that will, get teachers little moments of like, think about awe like this. And then, one of the things about Awe Garden, you've already pointed to this, is that we get really creative and innovative with awe. Um, Newton and Descartes were awestruck by rainbows. They're just like, how can this be? and and they did a lot of great math and physics and color theory to figure it out. And I think that, I think we'll see that, and it's just a recurring theme in innovation is awe leads us to new ways to think, and so it's coming. I had an individual in Colorado reach out. She's teaching awe in prisons. There's going to be more awe in schools and wonder. So I think it's going to be a really rich next decade of awe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I'm thinking of Martin Luther King and from Birmingham, and how there was a moment where he was just about ready to throw up his hands and say, I'm done with it.
Yeah.
I believe he had an experience of awe of the vast transcendence.
Really?
And it caused him to go, well, maybe I better rethink this. So again, in compassion work, as you know, we start with compassion, and then we go to compassion for others. But the last piece in compassion training is systems. And systems sound pretty boring, but
I agree.
how do we how do we make that connection, and how does the common person find themselves in a place where they can begin to think about systems that begin to be part of that moral arc of history that King talked about?
Yeah, we in the West are hamstrung in a sense because we have this long tradition of analytical thinking, of breaking things into parts and isolating elements, and then the individualism of the West, which I believe to be one of the barriers to well-being, has a lot of strengths, rights and freedoms and the like, but it ultimately misses some big themes of existence that were part of many systems. And I think that, and that's what I like about awe, is it brings into people's consciousness viscerally an awareness of systems that they're part of, that when they're out in nature, they're like, God, I just feel like, I'm standing in the ocean, I'm hearing the waves, I feel their rhythm, I'm part of this somehow. My breathing seems to be synced up with it. When people feel that very viscerally with music, that it surfaces that, wow, here I am, I'm part of this community, I feel transcendent connection. I don't know these people. We're united by the feeling of this music, as Susan Langer, the great philosopher, argued. People feel it spiritually, obviously. And then in terms of morality, like the people we gravitate to and find moving and inspiring, have something that unites us into larger groups. And I think that, we have a lot of research showing that's what, emotions are here to surface fundamental insights about reality. Compassion surfaces the idea that their suffering is part of life and I can take care of it. It's the first noble truth of Buddhism, so it's like, and awe surfaces at its core, like, I am part of large systems. And then, the task is, whatever context you're in, and this is what we're doing with our education work, is to get kids to think about, you love basketball, it blows your mind. Okay, you're a 10-year-old. Why? Write about that system that makes you feel awe. And I think we have strong capacities for it, and awe surfaces it. And we just need to reflect a little to build that back into our thinking.
Yeah, well, one of the pieces of the book that sort of leapt off the page for me, I've done a lot of work with the Global Play Institute. I believe there was a prior administration that put in something called No Child Left Behind, which left an incredible generations of kids behind. Because, as you said, it approaches the analytical, individualistic, particular part of the brain. And so we've left music, we've left play, we've left all these things off the curriculum in order to make test scores. I'm really passionate about this. So, how do we create a revolution to help people see that actually you have two sides to the brain? And Steiner said, why don't you begin to cultivate imagination and the other side? So how is the Greater Good Science Center looking at that particular issue? Because I think that for me is huge, because it's a whole generation of kids.
Yeah, no, wow, do I feel it, I mean, the students that I teach at Berkeley are kind of the products of that, which is it's a very STEM oriented, culture. Like a lot of universities, the humanities are really struggling in universities. We're not giving them music or art or poetry. Likewise, of course, as you cite, Gard, with schools. And I think, you know, I think there are a couple of angles at this. I mean, first of all, it's interesting. Like, Chat GPT might eliminate the need for coders and software engineers and statisticians. If you can just say, like, do machine learning on these data, that's interesting. And I don't think it will eliminate our hunger for art and music and literature and film. Yeah, I think that we take a couple of approaches at the Greater Good Science Center. And the first, and it's illustrative of this awe course that we're offering, which I'm really proud of, and I think it's going to be, I think it's going to seed awe in thousands of schools, is, to return these great passions or moral sentiments or ethics of compassion, gratitude, awe, empathy, into the moments a teacher has with some freedom, right? You might be teaching math or biology or, government or culture. There's a lot of awe in each of those disciplines, and find the moments where teachers can surface what we've been talking about. Wow, how do you feel about this? What inspires you? What is the larger system here that you are part of, right? Awe. So that's one. And then, I think that the second angle, and I feel this with people, is more broadly, the science of awe starts to make the case that nature is good for you. We know that, but now we know it very deeply. So, I'm working with the national parks on awe programs. Music is good for you through awe. So let's increase our availability of that. Visiting museums can be good for you. So I think at a broader cultural level, the awe to health connection in these domains we typically don't think are part of health starts to change the conversation. And we'll see. This culture is not friendly to public art and to funding art. And I always have leaned on the health argument to advance that kind of cause.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you and I have something in common. I don't visit a major city without going to their natural history museum. I'm an amateur paleontologist. I've been part of a museum for 40 years, and we go looking for fossils. And
tell me about a moment of awe in a natural history museum.
Well, it was the first time I went fossil hunting. I went out with my pick and I picked away at a hill, and my biology professor, who was the museum curator, came over and he exclaimed in the loudest of terms, "Laudate Deum, Jameson, you found," and he cited it in Latin, but it was actually Kentucky Fried Chicken bones that had been planted there earlier. But I still felt awe. I felt like I had discovered something amazing.
Yeah. And I love how the absurd hovers near awe, and that's part of the human condition. And I've had those moments too. So
Yeah, but it's understanding. And can you give us the definition that you give in the book of awe? Because I think it has to do with big history.
Yeah.
And that's what natural history museums teach us, is the big history.
Yeah. Yeah. I draw upon a lot of spiritual writing, which were the early efforts in the written word to understand awe. And then Edmund Burke in particular, very influential Irish philosopher, to say that awe really is an emotion that you feel in which you encounter vast mysteries that are beyond your frame of reference. Mm-hmm. So if we go around in our daily lives with this kind of analytical, narrow self-focus, awe is when we get pushed out of that and we see, wow, there's this vast system that my an event that I see, an act of kindness or a piece of music is part of this broader trans-historical system. And then you feel marvel and amazed at what you're perceiving. One of my favorites interviews in the book was Yumi Kendall, who's a cellist in the Philadelphia Symphony. And she, I just started talking to her about playing the cello and her feelings of transcendence. And she said, every time I get up on stage and I play music and there I feel my individual notes come out, that's just ordinary experience. Suddenly I'm aware of how they're part of humanity's 100,000, 200,000 year history of music. And I start crying, you know, and that's what awe is. Like you said, Gard, it's like my actions and thoughts are part of these historical systems that are really the truth of our consciousness and identity.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And, you know, Carl Jung, I know you're familiar with, and he wrote a letter once upon a time, and he said real, the real cure to mental health, the release from the psychopathology of mental illness is the approach to the numinous or
Yeah,
the awe.
yeah.
And, you know, as we grapple with the mental illness issues in our,
Oh man.
and you said healthcare, but I'm going to take it to the psychological dimension.
Yeah.
And we see the vast devastation of a generation of kids whose mental
Yeah.
health has been severely affected. It seems like, you know, more than perhaps Walgreens or CVS, we've got actually a cure,
Yeah.
and it's awe.
Yeah.
And so speak about that a little bit.
Thank you. You know, your framing of the question gave me goosebumps. Sharing together this feeling about this generation. This is, you know, Gene Twenge at San Diego State has a new book out on this, you know, the generations, these millennials and whatever we call them. You know, depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicide have risen dramatically, and a sense of, you know, hopelessness and the like, for a lot of good reasons, the climate crisis being the most prominent. But, you know, I read this essay by Rachel Carson, who's one of my heroes, and, you know, to teach a child to wonder. And she said, this is the fundamental thing we have to teach children, is to always wonder, to always go in search of awe. And her essay, which I really profile in the book, is remarkable. And ironically, it's found in Ladies' Home Companion. It's one of my favorite pieces of scholarship, next to this mayonnaise ad and women with these bouffant hairdos and the like. You know, it's totally a revolutionary essay, and that's what we have to do. You know, is that we, and I do believe it. This generation will find it, that it has to. We have to revise our educational system, move away from test scores, and move towards wonder and the personal experience of awe. Like, what is it telling you? You may want to be a carpenter. You know, my dad was a great carpenter, and it doesn't need math. It needs the beauty and aesthetics of how you work with wood and tools and the like, etc. So I think, you know, we need to change our conceptualization of education. And then we need, you know, it's interesting. I'm working with a group right now thinking about how we schedule our time. We need to change kids' thinking about time, you know, that they need to have open periods in the day and wander. I'm astonished. This is more personal. Like, I watch all these college grads. When I graduated from college, you're almost required to like go out and wander a bit and explore and have doubts. And they just don't feel that now, you know. And there are economic reasons why, but still, we need to shift out of this self-focus to ask the students the big questions, and engage them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned there's going to be a course at the Greater Good Science Center.
Yeah,
Is it going to be an online opportunity, or is it an in-house opportunity?
it's an online one, and it's GG. You go to ggie.berkeley.edu, and you'll see the advertisement for it. There is, you know, it does cost to take it. There are 8 modules. They work through the 8 wonders of life we've talked about. How do you find and teach awe in music and moral beauty and nature, big ideas, the life-death cycle, etc. And, you know, but really, when you think about it, it's relevant to, you know, I work with people who are teaching visitors to museums, starting work with the national parks and the like, that, you know, we all should be teaching on. And it has some really interesting practical exercises, really in the spirit of what you're pressing on, Gard, which is like, how do I get somebody to think about the broader systems here, right? How do I get somebody to dwell in mystery and let the mind go where it should go. So we're really proud of it.
Yeah, yeah. I have a nephew who had a very high A score, and
Mm,
you look at this generation coming up, and there's a lot of adverse childhood experiences that they're
mm,
going through. And
yeah,
I myself did the test and came up with a 4, which is pretty high. And
that's high.
but I
Yeah,
72 when I was down in Palo Alto, I learned to meditate, and
yeah,
so I'm not jerking as much as I used to.
yeah,
but
yeah.
but how do we cultivate the eye of awe? How do we cultivate that eye? Because a lot of people, it's just a blank stare right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that, and we're working hard on this, and I'll give you a couple of empirical examples. We we did a study that tested this thing I developed with mindful.org called the Awe Walk, which is when you go out for your walk, just add a little search for awe to it, right? And all you have to do is like think about doing something mysterious or going to a place where you feel a sense of wonder. Just add that to your walk. And that benefited people who are 75 years old or older just by adding that little element in terms of reducing physical pain. Really cool. We've just published a paper where 1 minute a day, this is with Michael Amster and Jake Eagle and Maria Monroy and others, you just take a moment to think about, like you said, like what's the bigger thing that you're part of right now,
Mhm.
right? Open your mind, pause, think about, wow, what am I part of? You and I are part of the human tradition of conversing about ethical emotions. We're part of a community thinking about compassion and awe. Just remind yourself of that. And that helped healthcare providers over 21 days, um, sort of feel less depression and anxiety during the COVID pandemic. So I think what's coming, to answer your question, Gard, is a lot of awe curricula and exercises and challenges and spiritual practices, meditation practices. There's very little thinking in the mindfulness movement about awe. That's ridiculous, right? Spiritual practice is awe. So it's, it's coming, and it's already here in different forms. And I think that will provide a suite of offerings, right? What I'm really interested in, sorry to go on, is how do we do this in nature? Uh, there, and how do we do it with music, right? Music is always available. What is a 1 minute practice you can do to find more awe in music? And it's going to be, we'll succeed at doing that, and give it away as a way to really benefit from this incredible emotion like compassion that we've evolved.
Exactly, exactly. And I was talking to Rick Hansen recently, and I said, Rick, you illustrated something very powerful, which is that we all have TV brains. And he scratched his head. He said, "What's a TV brain?" I said, "You in your beautiful book, Buddha's Brain, said we have Teflon for positive experience and we have Velcro for negative experience,
Yeah,
which from an evolutionary standpoint has served us well. We wouldn't be on the screen if we didn't have that fear factor
yeah,
inside of it. But we let the positive experiences sort of slip away very quickly
yeah,
without thought.
yeah,
I believe in neurodharma, he suggested hold on to that for a moment,
yeah,
embrace that. So
yep.
you speak about that and how the brain actually does get rid of those positive, awesome experiences way too quick.
Yeah, well, we don't, it's interesting. We don't know if that really applies to awe and all the sources of awe, of moral beauty, when we encounter someone who moves us to tears because of their courage or overcoming, like Martin Luther King, right? Or music. We don't know. And we're starting a lot of research on music, and in particular, and in nature, about how long do these effects last, right? And I have an intuition that, awe may violate these principles of the bad is stronger than the good because of its transcendent power, because it connects you to large systems that you need to be part of to survive. And so it's, as we say in science, an empirical question, and awe experiences may really stick. And I think that's a possibility. But yeah, this is so concerning when you think about what the kind of culture we create. Here's an interesting paradox, Gard. Jonah Berger has done this really nice work from the University of Pennsylvania, showing really inspiring, awe-inspiring content is what people love online. You know, they love sharing it, they love reading it, they love talking about it with people. It's the most viral content online. He's got great work on that. And yet, you go over to Facebook or Meta, and they prioritize rage, right? They're like, we're going to get people addicted to rage. The bad is stronger than the good. So here we see this interesting disconnect, which is humans want goodness. They want to tell these morally inspiring stories, but you know, the headlines in the New York Times and then Facebook, all these disseminators operate according to different principles. So you know, and that's why the Daily Good is so important. Charter for Compassion, Greater Good Science Center. You know, a hunger for the stickiness of the good, and I think awe. And it's an empirical question, may be the stickiest in terms of Velcro of experiences, alongside trauma, of course. And we need to privilege that in what we do.
That sounds right. You know, during the pandemic, I've been watching a lot of resistance movies, too, and your book helped me appreciate why I'm
Yeah.
watching movies, because the moral beauty of the people who resisted
Nice.
what seemed like an overwhelming power is just beyond. So Schindler's List, these kinds of stories.
Yeah.
So I believe you identified moral beauty as the peak, as the
Yeah.
number one,
Yeah.
which surprised you. So talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to take some questions. Felipe's
Yeah.
ask some questions.
But first, I have to ask you a question, Gard. What are three favorite resistance movies?
Well, I think the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer during World War II, where he attempted to, as a pastor, a Protestant pastor, to kill Adolf Hitler. But he saw the massiveness of what that man and his team was doing. And then Schindler's List obviously comes to light. But then there's so many stories. And what you realize is that the Holocaust was not Germany, it was England, it was France, it was Italy, it was Hungary, it was Norway. You had collaborators all across the sea there. And so it was all of Europe that was engaged in collaborations.
Yeah.
And then you had a few brave souls who said no.
Yeah.
They put their lives on the line to shelter and to create passports. Wilfred Israel, who very few people know, he was the Jeff Bezos of the time. He had a retail center right across from Gestapo headquarters in Berlin, and they couldn't touch him because he had a British passport until the war began. But he was the Kindertransport hero. He funded that boat that took a lot of kids to England.
Wow.
Right there at the top of the list. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I just almost teared up at your recounting of the story. Yeah, you know, moral beauty. We are moved to awe, to tears, to chills, to transcendence, almost the numinous, although that's interesting to think about, with people's courage and kindness and overcoming, you know. And we gathered stories from 26 countries that I profile in the book, just to understand what awe is. And, you know, I was expecting nature and spirituality, and there they were, you know, the Alps and the Rockies and night skies and the like. But our most common source of awe was moral beauty. And, you know, and not only that, but there were stories of just people, you know, people writing about their grandmother or their dad who raised in poverty, worked 92 years, wife dies early just to support the kids, you know, until he was 92. A dad, I remember this story in Pittsburgh in 1973, where his son comes into the bar he tended, and his best friend comes in, who's African American. A patron at the bar calls him the N-word, and the dad throws him out of the bar, just like, get out of here, never come back. And the son is like, wow, my dad has such truth to him. And to me, it surprised me because of what we're talking about, which is we have such cynical views, you know, of human beings. We forget how remarkable our kindness is. It's just defining in our evolution, how courageous people are routinely, how much they sacrifice. And it changed my life, Gard. I just suddenly you know, when I walk out, when I walk to work today these days at Berkeley, you know, once you start thinking about the lens you talked about, there's moral beauty everywhere, you know, of kids, you know, helping other kids at the preschool I walk by, and, you know, parents laughing with each other as they push kids on swings, and somebody giving money to an unhoused individual, shelterless person. Uh, and what a powerful resource to tap into is that.
Really is. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions, and I believe Felipe has those questions. Go ahead, Felipe.
Yes, of course. So one of the first questions we have is, have you studied awe with people who are at end of life, and do they have more awe experiences?
Yeah, you know, part of having these talks about awe is I come away like, God, I wish I had studied that. And this is one, because, you know, Gard mentioned Laura Karstensen, who has this great thinking about the last years of life, where you start to realize how limited time is, how the layers of time of your life add up, how miraculous life is. And so, but I haven't, and we don't know. And I think that it gets more poignant, it gets more mixed with emotions like the beauty of sadness and loss, and it may increase over time at the end of life. And that's a really interesting hypothesis. I think it would. What I do report on in the book is the end of the near-death experience literature, where people literally near the end of life have a lot of awe experiences. It looks a lot like awe and bliss. So we don't know. If there's a young scientist out there, please study it. It's a great, great question.
Yeah, good.
Next question. How would you suggest that the experience of awe be carried out of the school systems? It seems that once you get a job, mortgage, once idealism or the sense of awe fades away.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I'm teaching my human happiness class at Berkeley, and across 46 countries, that's a reliable trajectory in happiness, which is you start at like 18, you're 16, you're peaking, and then until you're about 60, my age, you just drop in happiness, because it's so materialistic, and it's money and making ends meet and raising teenagers if you have kids. And that's really one of the things I'm very committed to, is to bend that curve, you know, to as Rachel Carson said, like, to teach people how to cultivate awe. How do you find it each day? How do you find it in the morning? How do you find it when you're walking, right? How do you find it looking at the sky? And I think we will build a lot of good practices and programs for that, and see if we can change that pretty universal tendency to lose a sense of awe towards the middle of life.
Thank you for that. Next question. In this time of climate crisis, how do we encourage engagement with awe in the lives of those who have power and are entrenched in domination and control?
Yeah. Good luck. I always get this question, like, but what about capitalism and globalization? Yeah, well, you know, I am a huge, you know, I think there's the top-down approach to building more awe into our cultures. Can medical doctors and principals and federal judges and God forbid Wall Street sort of start to think about wonders and protecting wonders like the natural world? I also believe in bottom-up approaches to social change, very much so, in the spirit of Howard Zinn, that Gard cited Martin Luther King. There are all these examples of radical social world change coming from wonder and awe. And I am working with Patrick Gonzalez, Nobel Prize winner at Berkeley, tree scientist, climate scientist, who really is committed to, with his Institute of Parks, Biodiversity, and People, to promoting awe in the environmentalist movement, right? That this may be the key at an individual level to consume less, burn fewer fossil fuels, at the policy level to think about how protecting lands around the world, the 30% movement can bring us more awe. 360 million people go to our national parks each year. It's the singular American experience. And how do we build on to that experience in ways that protect our natural world? I think it's awe does that for us and now we got to institutionalize it.
Thank you. There's this person here that is doing some research on the transcendental effects of beauty and the practice of craft as an alternate spirituality through the lens of eco-theology. The question is, how do you distinguish between awe and beauty?
Good luck.
Man, that's a hard question, and thank you for asking it. This was the central question of Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant, you know, who are two of the kind of defining Western European Age of Enlightenment treatments of awe, and then later the Romanticists in the 1800s. Burke said, you know, 1757, I think, awe is kind of mysterious and big and shakes you, and beauty is softer and easier to understand, and you don't have the mystery that's part of it, right? Or the destabilizing, as Gard pointed out, like, whoa, I don't understand this, right? And I think he got it right, and I will direct the reader. It's hard to do scientifically to really separate them because they are, but a paper by Alan Cowan from and 2017 on the experience of emotion, we pull apart awe and beauty. And if you look at what we do, it is how people respond emotionally to little short film clips called GIFs or GIFs. And if you look at them, you get a sense like beauty does seem more understandable. It's not so mind shaking. It's the field of flowers. It's the dancers moving in this beautiful flow. Awe is the big swirl of birds that goes in patterns you don't understand, or a lightning storm like I saw with my daughter Natalie backpacking really close. And it is more threatening and mysterious. And that's as close as we can get. It's a hard scientific problem.
Thank you. And last question on this for both of you, Gard and Dacher. Can each of you answer the following? What is the first experience that comes to mind when you experience awe in the natural world?
Go ahead, Dacher.
Well, you know, mine, it's just like Gard's, and it's really funny. It has a very interesting parallel, which is, and I think I wrote about this in the book. My dad was a visual artist. We're in LA. He loved taking me to museums. I love museums, thanks to my dad. And he took me to the Los Angeles County Art Museum, and outside of it are the La Brea tar pits. And the La Brea tar pits are this tar, and there's a woolly mammoth and a saber-toothed tiger fighting, you know. And I was 4 or 5, and I just like looked at it, and it is the natural world, but it's a artistic portrayal of it. And from that moment on, I was interested in dinosaurs and natural history museums and evolution. And I don't know why. It led me to bake a cake for the cake competition in 1st grade, the T-Rex cake. I got 2nd place, you know. I became fascinated by deep time and evolution just from that moment, you know, and I hope all kids have that chance because it changed my life.
Beautiful. Yeah, and for me, it was 1972. I'd heard about a friend of mine in Vietnam who had been walking down a dirt path with his battalion, and 3 kids with hand grenades in both hands approached his battalion. At the end of it, my friend Lee Benjamin had lost his leg and his battalion was dead, and the 3 kids were lying in their blood. Yeah. And in that moment, that grisly, horrible, awesome moment, I turned off all the lights. I was putting in fire alarm systems in Pasadena, and turned off all the lights, and I said, I need to know, is somebody here? Is there something larger going on here that I need to know about? Otherwise, I can't pay the rent. I'm done.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was filled, every cell in my body was filled with a quality of unconditional love. And I knew, right? And that's sort of a milestone moment. And your book is a milestone, in my opinion. But a milestone moment that I knew that the fabric of the universe is love.
Yeah.
Out of that love comes living truth and awesome beauty and moral goodness like none of us could ever imagine if we look for it. If we look for it, it's all around us, as you say. So thank you.
Yeah, what an incredible story. And I love how, when I think of that life experience, how horror, absolute unimaginable horror, leads you to like, I got to change this. You know, it's remarkable.
Well, and I will say as we wrap up here, I just want to say that the story of you and Molly and your family coming around Rolf
Yeah.
during his, not just at the end, but during the whole period when you saw that he was sick and he was going from 200 and some pounds to 145. And
Yeah.
you saw him lying there and you had that sense that he was seeing things that you weren't seeing.
Yeah.
You were wondering. And just want to say the moral beauty of your family, it leads me to awe. So thank you. That was a real gift for me in the book. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me just walk in here. Thank you both so much for taking the time to share this incredible stories and questions and answers to all of us here and to the people that will be watching this recording on our YouTube channel. There was a comment made that says, you know, it'd be wonderful to hear other people's first awe stories.
Yeah.
So if you're inclined to do so, we encourage anyone to email Lynn, Lynn, at charterforcompassion.org to share those stories. Let me just quickly share my screen to give you the last details of what's going on here. So we have our next course on CEIs with Reverend Diane Burke, Susan Soleil, and Kate Sheehan Roach on Becoming Creatures of Boundless Love, Elements of Interspirituality Living. This course begins on October 16th for 4 weeks, and the registration is now open. We also have our EdNet Forum with Lucy Gray and the Actionable Innovations. That is on September 21st, Thursday, next Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. You can register on our website. And our next global read would be on the book We, a Manifesto for Women Everywhere. And one of the co-authors of this book is Jennifer Nadel, who is a great supporter of the Charter for Compassion as well. And last but not least, we got our Charter Sangha, which is our circle that we do every last Saturday of every month. This one is October 30th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, so you can register there. And so with that, let me stop sharing my screen here. Thank you both so much for taking the time once again to inspire us, to give us more sense of awe and wonder. And I think this is an incredible part of compassion, how as we see all these beautiful things around us and even the questioning of everything around us leads us to more compassion and self-compassion. So thank you both for that.
I encourage all of our listeners to go to that course, because I do believe the real revolution in our moment is awe. I think Dacher's book, I encourage you to listen to it, because Dacher actually reads it, and I appreciate you reading it because I can hear the whoa. And I just want to say what an honor and what a joy to be with you this morning, Dacher. And I just thank you, because you are leading this revolution along with your team, and it's a vast team of individuals, I know. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, because this is where hope lies for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Gard. What an incredible conversation.
Namaste.